Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Palo Alto, where we come to transform ourselves and each other and the world. All right, we will visit again after the service. I want to introduce our guest speaker, my friend Rick Mixon, formerly known as Randle, and that's how he appears in your order of service. He has served many years at the First Baptist Church here in Palo Alto, a church now in the process of closing down, but his ministry continues. He is also a professor at the American Baptist Seminary of the West, one of the many seminaries along with our Star King School for the Ministry in the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. It's a real pleasure to have Rick, and his words are inspiring this morning. You're in for a treat. Our justice partner this month is UU the Vote. Just voted in at our annual meeting a couple of weeks ago. And Christy Iverson is with us to speak to us about what our support means.
Hi, my name is Christy Iverson. As many of you know, I'm the chair of UUCPA's Action Council, and I'm here today to talk about UU the Vote, a national nonpartisan faith initiative which our church is actively supporting. This year, the Unitarian Universalist Association is assisting congregations and UU organizations in activating thousands of UUs to advance electoral justice at the local, state, and national level. This includes working against voter suppression and supporting Get Out the Vote efforts, as well as advocating for vote by mail in states where this is difficult or impossible today, especially for communities of color and other marginalized voters. Rather than trying to replicate what other organizations are already doing, the work of the UU the Vote national team is the following: to amplify and coordinate work already happening on the ground, to equip UUs with the needed skills, tools, and training, to channel resources to parts of the country where the imbalance between the work needed and the resources available is the greatest, including deploying paid statewide organizers in states such as Wisconsin, where our values are most at risk. And finally, to offer organizing grants and funding fellowships for individuals, congregations, and UU state action networks, such as our UU Justice Ministry of California. In fact, UU the Vote recently hired a national organizer, and this past week sent the first round of funding to Pennsylvania, Ohio, and North Carolina. Given the current situation with COVID-19, new approaches are being developed to engage voters virtually, such as providing a high-volume phone banking system and apps for contacting people you know to encourage them to vote. Please watch for information on our website, in Announce, and in the bulletin on how you can engage in our efforts, especially right now from home in this election year. For today, please consider supporting our May Justice partner, UU the Vote, with a donation. As a reminder, since the work we are doing is entirely nonpartisan, gifts to UU the Vote are considered charitable contributions, not political donations. We hope you will join us today to make a difference in November and beyond.
Thank you so much, Christy, and it's such an inspiring work. I'm really glad we have the opportunity to support it and to be active in it. And now, let us begin our service. chalice for all who are here and all who are not. For those who may yet find this spiritual home, and for those we can't even yet imagine. For each of us and for us all, may this flame burn warm and bright. With our centering words each week, we draw on one of the sources of our living tradition. Today's words come from the writer Julia Alvarez. The point is not to pay back kindness, but to pass it on. Let us follow the sound of the bell into silence and arrive fully in this sacred time and community that we create through each other's presence. Bruce will now lead us in singing For All That Is Our Life. The words are in your order of service.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. For all that is our life, we sing with thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Wow, look at all this food. Olives, bread, cheese, wine. This is more food than I've seen in a long time.
We who follow Jesus believe that God has provided enough for everyone, if we all share and share alike equally.
Well, Ishmael, doesn't this make up for selling your business You're giving all your money to the poor.
Boy, these olives are really good. Yeah, everyone is so nice here. I mean, they really do treat each other as they would like to be treated themselves.
We're both very glad to be here. Thank you for welcoming us.
We're glad you've joined us. Ishmael, we're glad you like the food. And we do try to treat each other with love and kindness. Just remember that not everyone likes us. Right, Phoebe?
That's right, Thecla. The Romans don't like us. And the high priests of the great temple are worried because the Romans don't like us. We're going to start with going to other cities and join the synagogues there.
Yes, my daughter Priscilla and I are going to Rome.
We think it would be a good idea to make connections with the Jewish community in Rome. We think it would be a good idea to take our teachings to a capital city of the entire Roman Empire.
I'm going to Corinth to connect with the synagogue there.
Wow! It sounds like the followers of Jesus are going everywhere. Should Ishmael and I travel somewhere? To help spread the teachings of Jesus?
We were hoping that perhaps you two could go to Thessalonica.
What? Me go to Greece?
Come on, Ishmael. It'll be great. The best olives in the world grow there. Of course we'll go. We want to do our part.
Good. We want you to spend a few more days here to learn more about how we do things. Then we'll all leave together.
Just think, Ishmael. Soon we'll be on a ship heading across the ocean to Greece. Imagine what adventures we'll have.
I just hope you know what you're getting us into, Barnabas.
Will Ishmael get up the courage to leave Judea? Who will get seasick? Tune in next week for the final episode.
The final episode? No, we want more. Hey, I got feedback that my sound was not very clear before, so I'm trying a different microphone. Will you let me know if this is better? As we enter into our time of caring and sharing. People are. Let us now take a quiet time of prayer or meditation to reflect on what we have heard, to feel with gratitude our connection to one another, even in sorrow, especially in our difficult times. It is so good to know we are all connected one to another. Let us take this silent time to send out prayers and deepen our connection to one another in our hearts. Blessed be. Now, Bruce will lead us in singing Ubi Caritas. The words are in your order of service.
Ubi caritas et amor, ubi caritas Deus ibi est, ubi caritas et amor, ubi caritas Deus ibi est, ubi caritas et amor, ubi caritas Deus ibi est.
Sitting outside Amy's office enjoying the beautiful day. Thank you to Amy for the invitation to preach and to be part of your worshiping community this morning. Thank you to Dan and the drama troupe for the wonderful presentation, to Veronica and Bruce for the excellent music, to Christy for sharing. Christy and Dick Dude and I are part of the steering committee for Multi-Faith Voices for Peace and Justice. So I count them among my friends. And thanks to the tech crew for taking care of us. And if I'm not speaking up, Amy will tell me, I guess, because I can see all right, but the mask makes my glasses fog. Anyway, in our tradition, we follow the lectionary, which assigns readings from the Bible for each Sunday. And one of the readings for this Sunday is this passage from the New Testament book of Acts. It's Luke's account of what the first church was like in the aftermath of Pentecost. He writes, "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Awe came upon everyone, because many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together and in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved."
I left it out of the order of service, but I have the great honor of being the worship associate today and therefore of giving a reflection. And some of the ideas raised by Acts are something I've reflected on quite a lot. The early church that's described there, the way people shared everything in an open and common way, have inspired a lot of communities down through the years. Christian communes, such as the Unitarians' own Hopedale near Boston in the 19th century, and many, many others. I wonder if that vision of people living together and sharing alike whatever is needed even inspired Karl Marx and socialists and communists who came after him, as hostile as he was to religion and specifically Christianity. Another person who was inspired was somebody who works in a genre of literature that is particularly key to helping us imagine ways of living together that human beings have not necessarily done yet, and that is science fiction. It's one of my favorite books, The Dispossessed, published in the 1970s by Ursula K. Le Guin. And in it, she describes a culture, an entire planet called Anares, in which the only principle of what we might call law, what they do not call that, is mutual aid. People help one another. There are no police. There are no courts. There are no locks on any of the doors because there is no property, which is to say that everything is owned in common. When somebody needs a new pair of jeans, they go to the dispensary and they find a pair of jeans that suits them and fits them, and they walk away with it. And everybody shares the work, the difficult work, the unlikable work, as well as the work that they are particularly called by their talents and interests to do. I've wondered sometimes if somebody came with a rocket and said, "Amy, you can emigrate to Anares right now. Would I go?" That's my own thought experiment, pairing Ursula Le Guin's own Would I go? Would I live with no possessions in exchange for being in a community where everyone shares what they need? Everybody has what they need. Or if times get hard, and she describes such a time in the course of the novel, when there's a terrible drought and a famine that goes on for years, nobody is hungry while another eats. If they suffer together. If they thrive together. What an amazing vision of a community. So would I be willing to live that way? John Lennon in Imagine seems to think that imagining having no possessions is the hardest thing for us. And I look around at my possessions, of which I'm very fond. I collect art and books and put things on the walls that I like to have around me. I came here today in my own car that I paid for and that only I and my family have the right to travel in. And I wonder, do I really care about owning them? I don't think I do. I think I want the use of these things, and I wish that everybody had the use of all the books and cars and clothes and houses that they need. I don't think ownership is so important. No rocket ship has arrived to test my theory. Of course, I live this way. We mostly do, all of us, in families. We have a little communistic society where we all contribute, we all pitch in, and we all freely take from what we need. Take what we need from what the family owns. And to a large extent, a congregation works that way as well. But I've often thought, as I run this little thought experiment for myself, how would we make that work on a larger scale? And the problem, of course, seems to be that not everybody would participate well. It's as if you need everyone to have glad and generous hearts in order to live in such a community. That's what I've always thought. And it wasn't until this week when I was pondering the reading that Rick has brought to us, and after I spoke to him about his thoughts on the service, that it occurred to me that what Acts is telling me is that maybe I've got it backwards. That it's not the glad and generous hearts that make the sharing possible, but living in a sharing community that gives us such joy and generosity. Maybe we need to make it so, and we will discover what happens to us. So since no rocket ship has shown up, I know what I need to do. I know if I want to live in a community at all like Anaris, I'm going to have to help build it here. Rick.
Thanks, Amy, for that reflection. I imagine that most of us would agree that this is not the best of times. Is it the worst of times? I can't say for sure, certain, but it surely feels like it. There are many things within the current social and political scenes that feel pretty awful, as bad as we can remember. The problem with judging this as the worst of times is that we lose sight of some terrible times that have gone before. For instance, not long ago I read Ron Chernow's great biography of Alexander Hamilton. Interestingly, it is the work on which the contemporary hit musical is based. The book is an excellent historical account of a key figure in the founding of this country, but it seems highly unlikely as a source for a musical. I confess I haven't seen the musical, so I can only give credit to Lin-Manuel Miranda's genius from afar, for it must take genius to make music of such an account of a most challenging time in the history of the United States. In those days, the political infighting in the late 18th century between the Federalists and the Republicans was fierce. Sounds familiar. Each side believed the success of the new nation was totally dependent on its point of view, and each feared the other was selling out America's newfound independence The Republicans believed the Federalists were a front for the British monarchy, and the Federalists saw the Republicans as tools of the chaos and bloodshed of the French Revolution. This was the beginning of party politics, which in our own time had become deeply entrenched and intractable, as many of the nation's founders feared they would. If you think today's news conferences, fake or otherwise, tweets, leaks, hacks, and other political chicanery are bad, you should read about the terrors of politics in the 1790s. The diatribes, name-calling, mudslinging, etc. was vicious and offered up under pseudonyms that purported to keep the authors anonymous and safe. Libelous commentary and threats to honor were still settled with duels, one of which took Hamilton's life. I can't affirm with certainty that this earlier time was worse than the present, but it surely was not good. The current political environment, along with the COVID-19 pandemic, has exposed great rifts in our social fabric. The depth and the breadth of racism, sexism, classism, xenophobia, and generalized fear and hatred that for many years lay dormant have been exposed. My friend Laura Mayo observes that some are now seeing, perhaps for the first time, that our society is thickly contoured by sedimented injustice laid down over generations. We've watched the current occupant of the White House, in a colossal failure of leadership, create chaos in the country through contradicting experts, relying on charlatans, making claims to knowledge and understanding he clearly does not have, facilely lying to the American people, and refusing to take responsibility for any of his missteps and dissembling. Of course, he does not carry all the blame for the mess we're in. There are others who are equally and perhaps more dangerously responsible. You could name your own litany. We live in a time of dangerous opportunity. What will our future be? We do have some say in that. The great Canadian troubadour Leonard Cohen sang what's become a familiar refrain. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. These great social rifts with which we're confronted are letting in a lot of light. The question is whether we will rush to seal up those cracks and refuse to see or follow the light. With a high degree of hope, author and poet Sonia Renee Taylor has written recently, "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was never normal, other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all humanity and nature. Indeed, we are being given the opportunity to walk in the light. Are we willing and able to take those steps? Several years ago, when the House of Representatives passed a health care bill that promised more harm than health for many Americans, Massachusetts Congressman Joe Kennedy proclaimed in a prescient speech that seems intricately interwoven with today's text. It's among the most basic human truths. Every one of us someday will be brought to our knees by a diagnosis we didn't expect, a phone call we can't imagine, or a loss we cannot endure. That common humanity inspires our mercy, he argues. It fortifies our compassion. It drives us to look out for the sick, the elderly, the poor, and the most vulnerable among us. He says yesterday's devastating bill, does the opposite. The bill is more than premiums and tax cuts. It's a cold and calculated worldview. And we're experiencing that so much these days. A cold and calculated worldview. One that scapegoats the struggling and sees faults in suffering. One dead set on dividing us based on who we love, where we come from, the direction of our faith, and the size of our fortunes. He insists we must reject it. We must decide instead to take care of each other, because, but for the grace of God, we will all one day wake up in need of a little mercy. Little did he know how quickly that day would come. He concludes, this nation's character has never been defined by the power we give the strong, the already strong, but by the strength we give the weak. Is it so? The framers of our Constitution held a tenuous belief that truly Republican government could and would form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Have these words ever really rung true? Following the founders, is Kennedy right? Do we believe we are part of a common humanity? Has our national character overall been defined by the strength we give the weak? Would God it were so. Sounds like gospel truth to me, even if it has never been consistently American truth. It does seem like Kennedy has caught some of the vision of that first community of Christ followers huddled in Jerusalem, what some refer to as the first church. In Luke's perhaps overly idealized summary of what that community was like, the strength given to the weak was crucial. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. It's easy to look at this passage from Acts and read communism between the lines in big red letters. Because of the great Cold War, which some of us lived through, that was waged between American capitalism and state communism, it's still a dirty word in the vernacular. And this text raises old specters for those of us who do remember. In a sermon entitled A Vibrant Communism, Australian Bruce Brewer begins by saying, given the fears, suffering, and massacres caused by the Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, Pol Pot brands of political communism during the 20th century, the word communism has been corrupted, maybe irredeemable. He says, can I even dare use the word communism without raising barriers and arousing hostility in many people? He says, I guess I'll know by the feedback after this sermon. Maybe I'll have the same experience. But rather than focus on the worst of times, I would rather attend ultimately to the good news in today's text. Even if Luke is embellishing what really happened among those first followers, this still seems to me to be a fitting account of the Jesus way. First and foremost, it says the early disciples devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. In other words, they grounded their lives individually and communally in spiritual discipline. This sort of spiritual practice is vital to understanding and living out the gospel in a faith community. Then, because they are engaged in this spiritual discipline, they were not only able to do signs and wonders as Jesus had, they were able, at least for a while, to sustain a community in which they shared not only their possessions, but their lives. They could live communally, praying, breaking bread, and eating together with glad and generous hearts. Isn't that a wonderful way to describe a community? One that is characterized not only by giving strength to the weak, but also by living life with glad and generous hearts. Maybe in these troubled times, especially in these troubled times, we as people of faith ought to work at cultivating glad and generous hearts. I don't mean we should stick our heads in the sand and while the world crumbles around us. It's always appropriate to stand up for what we believe and speak truth to power. But listen to the result of those first Christians living with glad and generous hearts. Luke says that they experienced the goodwill of all the people, and day by day God added to their numbers those who were being saved. There was actually something salvific in their witness, something infectious in the spirit of joy and generosity with which they approached life. Pruer, looking back at this first community, ends his sermon by suggesting to his contemporary congregation, such idealistic communism would be truly a bit of heaven on earth. Those first Christians bravely and lovingly practiced it in Jerusalem. Think of the witness that such a caring, sharing way of life must have had on the community around them. Folk would really sit up and take notice. No wonder new converts were being baptized every day. See, many people were and are drawn to that kind of decent, loving, uplifting way of navigating life. The holding all things in common, selling our possessions and goods, and distributing the proceeds to those in need may be a vision of God's beloved community for which we are not yet prepared. We can still live our lives caring and sharing, building up our common humanity, providing for the general welfare, giving strength to the weak, inspiring mercy, fortifying compassion, and looking out for the sick, the elderly, the poor, and the most vulnerable among us. And very importantly, because we have been loved, cared for, and blessed, we might live our lives even in tough times with glad and generous hearts. What do you think? Shall we give it a try? Amen.
Thank you so much, Rick. We have an opportunity to give it a try right now. I'm always so grateful when people among us organize groups such as UU the Vote to carry out exactly the vision that I have for our world. I think I wouldn't be able to organize that, but now I can support it. Now I can be a part of it. So that's what we're doing this month. And with today's offering, giving to our justice partner, you can give to the offering by following the QR code or the link in your order of service. And please use the memo box if the donation is intended for any other purpose than UU the Vote. Let us give to their wonderful work gladly and generously. Let us sing together. Come sing a song with me. The lyrics are in your order of service, and Bruce will lead us once again.
a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
When we take fire from our chalice, it does not become less, it becomes more. And so we extinguish our chalice, but we take its light and warmth within us and with us, multiplying their power by all of our lives and sharing it with the world.